Defense News is proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, new tech from the Army and Air Force, a uniform that acts like a smartwatch, and a major military cloud computing contract gets canceled. It's Order 66 on the JEDI contract. Plus, a conversation on what a full congressional docket means for the Pentagon. Finally, the Military Times team takes a look ahead at what they expect to be some of the biggest stories of the second half of this year. It's the latest news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon on this episode of Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. It's a big week for news around the military, so let's dive in. First up, a new type of fabric that can take your heartbeat, measure your temperature, and track how much you sweat. The Army is working on some new tech that could allow your uniform to read your biometrics. Todd South brings us more.
One of the things the Army's been trying to do for a number of years is better track soldier biometrics. Now you can do that with a smartwatch, but it's better if you can get more readings across the body, at the heart, at the lungs, in different areas of muscle activation. And what they're developing now with partners at MIT is a way to incorporate fibers that almost act like they're a standalone computer within each fiber, or almost like a smartwatch over your whole body. They're doing that and they're integrating it into fabric and using it to measure different characteristics of biofeedback. They've started with body temperature, gathering as much as 4.5 hours worth of body temperature readings from just an armpit portion of a t-shirt, and using that data to evaluate what exactly the soldier was doing during the time without knowing what activity they were doing, because they can measure the rate of temperature, even of perspiration. Now in the future, they want to add more activity, like electrical impulses perhaps from the brain, muscle activation to see kind of which parts of the body are being fatigued, and they want to communicate that across a lot of platforms. So that uniform can not only measure body biofeedback, but also communicate it out through radio networks so that a commander miles or thousands of miles away even could read and see kind of what's the conditions of my soldiers in this squad or platoon or even company. And by using that, they can then measure soldier performance and also track kind of their health characteristics. Moving beyond that, they can also hope to add new modules in the future with algorithms and software that would allow for collection of toxins in the environment. So say you're exposed to a chemical agent, even something as light as petroleum, what is that doing to the body? How is the body reacting? And over time, how often has that soldier been exposed to a toxin, maybe over the course of days, weeks, or months in theater? And they would know when to pull them out and do some kind of therapies or some kind of reactive medical interventions for such exposures. One of the reasons why commanders, leaders want to know how the body's performing, how a soldier's body temperature is being affected, is performance, overheating, overstress, dehydration. I mean, catching those things before they occur to where they're at a catastrophic state where a soldier might pass out, have heat exhaustion, heat stroke, is a way to improve performance, stop, take breaks, feed water, other types of things with, like, say, heart rate over time. They could find out if maybe there's a heart condition in a soldier that wasn't uncovered in, say, a medical or clinical location, but could be uncovered during intense training. And in early testing, something besides biometrics, they've also been able to store information in the actual fibers themselves. So they've actually stored short video clips up to 2 months in these fibers that are incorporated into clothing. So essentially you could gather intelligence, it could store within the uniform rather than in some other kind of a hard drive and be transmitted at a later date or stored for other usage. Now essentially this is made by creating spools of fiber with little microchips or processors in them. So what they do, as scientists explained to Army Times, was they take a kind of a pool of the polymers, kind of a liquid form. They insert very small microprocessors in there, I mean, almost can't see them with the naked eye, and they draw them out almost the way you make a candy cane with a spool of sugar, weaving the red and the white, together. Of course, these are transparent, translucent, there's no color to them. That then gets woven into the fabric itself of a uniform, or really any clothing item. You could put it into gloves, you could put it into a hat, a scarf. You could put it into obviously the t-shirts, what they're testing now, even your underwear or your boots. So they can track any part of your body. Maybe pressure sensitivity is another option they would be looking at to see kind of how much pressure you're putting on certain parts of the boot for future use. And that's basically how they can measure head to toe everything that's going on in the body, much more than what you find in the smartwatch. So work on this is still in the laboratory, so you probably won't see it very soon in your uniform, maybe a few years out, but we'll keep tracking here. This is Todd South, Army Times.
When we come back, the latest headlines from the defense industry. Don't go away.
Major General Arnold Punaro spent a career in the military and in Congress as a Senate Armed Services Committee staff director and knows defense budgets inside and out. Defense News' Joe Gould recently spoke to Punaro about current budget challenges.
Arnold Punaro, welcome to the program.
Great to join you.
So we have a budget from President Biden, but it came late and Congress has a crowded agenda. Where do we stand right now and what could it mean for the Defense Department?
In presidential transition years, we're always going to be running late, running slow. But I will tell you, it's as backed up as I've ever seen it with all the various authorizations, appropriations, budget resolutions, infrastructure bills, and things that have got to get passed here in the next couple of months. My instinct is that if you look at the administration's priorities, certainly infrastructure and their jobs bills and other things have a much higher priority in terms of the sequences of the legislative process than do our typical defense bills. So regrettably, I think we're looking at the defense bills, both authorization and appropriations, being delayed and getting done if they get done between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we're going to probably be running right up to the time when we're hanging our Christmas stockings and trying to figure out whether we're going to get from the Pentagon budget sugar plums or coal.
So the authorization bill is the massive defense policy bill, which passes out of the Armed Services Committee and Congress every year. The appropriations bills those are the spending bills. That's the actual budget. And when those don't pass at the end of the fiscal year, you get CRs, as you noted, a stopgap continuing resolution to keep the government open. Is a government shutdown possible?
The continuing resolution is going to be bad enough because it doesn't allow the department to change their priorities, to focus on the new technologies that are in the FY22 budget and things like that. I think the crystal ball in July is still too cloudy to predict what's going to happen in September. It's a debt ceiling year, so the debt ceiling has brought us chaos in the past. You will recall well. The worst thing you could do from a good government standpoint and a national good security standpoint is a shutdown, and nobody always says they want one, but we've ended up with them in the past. So is it a possibility? It always is a possibility. Is it likely? I certainly hope not, but it's too early to tell how all this is going to play out because there's so much, stirring around. There's not a clear path to see how you fix all these issues in the short period of time between now and 1 October.
I want to ask you about budget and policy, but let me take a detour into nominees. Some of President Biden's nominees for the Pentagon, like Frank Kendall. What can you tell us about the issues around Frank Kendall's nomination, and what do you think we can expect?
Well, Joe, let me talk about the big picture first and then get to the specifics that you asked about. Since the Kennedy administration, the time it takes for an administration, a president, to recruit and vet and then send a nomination to the Senate, and for the Senate to consider that nomination, that timeline has been increasing every year under every administration, from the Kennedy era when it was a matter of months to where it's almost a matter of almost a year now before you get the bulk of your major nominations through the system. The holes that people have alluded to about Frank Kendall, who, by the way, has been confirmed by the Senate twice before for senior Pentagon positions, it's not about him personally. People are trying to leverage his nomination to basically, the Michigan senators, for example, are upset because a base in Michigan is losing their A-10s. They were hoping to get a backfill of the Joint Strike Fighter international training. That's gone to Arkansas. They're thinking, okay, maybe if we hold up Frank Kendall, we'll get the Air Force to commit. And we've got a couple others. Senator Warren has announced that she's concerned about the recusal process, although the nominees that are on the calendar agree to every single one of the laws, rules, regulations required of nominees. She'd just like for them to go further.
Back on budget and policy, there are always fights every year, as you and I have discussed many over the years. What do you see as the top one or two confrontations brewing right now, either on the appropriations or authorization bills?
I would say on the appropriation side, it's going to be the amounts for domestic discretionary and defense discretionary. For example, the House Defense Subcommittee, which has already marked up their bill, they'll go to full committee when they get back. So the top line for domestic discretionary and defense will be a knockdown slugfest in both the House and the Senate. Then on the policy side, in the defense authorization bill, it will be all about major policy. You've got the issue of changing the Uniform Code of Military Justice to deal with sexual assaults. You've got the commission in the Pentagon. They'll have a recommendation. You have Senator Gillibrand has a bill that goes farther than the Pentagon's recommendations. Some of the conservatives are very concerned about what they consider people going too far in terms of some of the social issues in the Pentagon. So as always, words are a lot harder than money, even though the money is going to be very hard this year as well.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you see any momentum around any of the kinds of defense reforms that that you're talking about, whether it be the way the budget is crafted, or anything along those lines? Supply chain issues have gotten a lot of momentum in terms of the competition with China. What do you think we can expect?
I do, and the reason is just what you mentioned. You brought out China. I think as we come out of Afghanistan, we're at a major inflection point for our national security. Again, we've been there for 20 years. They built their military back. There's bipartisan agreement in Congress that China is the pacing threat and we need to do something about it. You've got legislation moving in both bodies that relate to that. The Pentagon gets it. The new administration gets it. So you have a consensus that we have a huge problem that we've got to change. And to get more bang for the buck for the dollars we spend, you've got to have these major reforms. You've got to get at these massive defense agencies. There's hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of billions of dollars tied up in these rear echelon type organizations that can, and many of them are big businesses. The DLA does more business with the Department of Defense than our largest defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, that it's not susceptible to world-class business practices we see in the modern world. So there's ample room for reform. We also have got to go after these emerging technologies. We want to focus on those technologies that are key for our country's economy, not just defense. Microelectronics, artificial intelligence, autonomy, hypersonics, all those things that 5G that are key. And there's a compelling case for reform. You're right to be skeptical because a lot of people have talked a good game here and we haven't seen the kind of progress we'd like to see. 27 chapters in my new book, 500 pages, and that's what it's all about. All the changes we need to make in the Congress, in the Pentagon, in Office of Management Budget, in the National Security Council to basically deal with the world and our economy as we need to in the decade ahead.
All right. Well, General Panaro, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. I really appreciate your many years of experience and your perspective. Thank you for bringing it to the program today.
Always a privilege to be with you.
We start our industry headlines with some major technology news. The Pentagon canceled its $10 billion JEDI cloud computing contract with Microsoft, which had been challenged by Amazon Web Services. The Department of Defense said in an announcement that with the shifting technology environment, the long-delayed contract no longer meets the Pentagon's needs. In its announcement of the JEDI cancellation, the department also announced a replacement cloud called the Joint Warfighter Cloud Capability. The department said that the government intends to seek proposals from limited sources, namely Microsoft and Amazon Web Services. Raytheon Technologies will get up to $2 billion to develop the U.S. Air Force's Long-Range Standoff Weapon System, a new nuclear-capable air-launched cruise missile that will be carried by B-52 and B-21 bombers. On July 1st, the service awarded Raytheon a deal for the engineering and manufacturing development stage of the LRSO program with contract options that max out at about $2 billion. And that's it for industry news. When we return, personal finance expert Jeanette Mack has banking tips for military families.
On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack talks about top tips for banking for military families.
Whether it's preparing for a new duty station or a spouse taking on the role of paying the bills while a loved one is deployed, military families live complex lives with unique challenges. A solid foundation for your finances is so important when facing any of life's missions as a military family. So where you put your money for checking and savings is a vital choice. Pick a financial institution that's trustworthy and reputable, maybe one that comes recommended by friends or family. A good one will prioritize your financial well-being over profits and even offer guidance on things like the type of savings account to open, step-by-step support when buying a home, or even setting up a power of attorney. Also, make sure your financial institution offers online or mobile apps that help track spending and saving. Not only will you be able to check your accounts on the go, but banking apps often have security features like push notifications to help keep your money safe. Choosing a bank or credit union is an important decision for anyone, but for the military, it's a vital partnership. So go for the one that knows the military, understands your needs, and puts you and your family first.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more of our coverage, check out Army, Navy, Air Force, and MarineCorpsTimes.com and DefenseNews.com. And get a list of the top military stories of the day in your inbox with our Early Bird Brief. And be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And when we come back, the Military Times editors look at some of the biggest stories to come for the second half of 2021. Well, with the second half of 2021 ahead of us, Military Times' reporters and editors take a moment to look at the topics they expect to dominate headlines in the coming months. Take a look.
Welcome to the Military Times Reporters Roundtable, where we bring you the inside stories behind the headlines in the military community each week. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times. With me again this week are Megan Myers, our Pentagon Bureau Chief, and Howard Altman, our Managing Editor. Thank you both for joining us. Look, we've made it through the first half of a very eventful 2021. We got a new president this year. We got a new defense secretary. We still have a new Space Force. So let's take a minute now and look ahead at the future to examine some of the biggest questions facing the Defense Department as we go on through the second half of the year. Howard, let me start with you. In May, President Biden announced that he planned to pull all U.S. personnel out of Afghanistan by September 11th. Looks like that work may be done in the next few weeks here before the summer's out, with only about 650 service members staying behind for embassy security duties. But is that it? Or do you think we're really going to be completely out of Afghanistan, or are we going to end up sending personnel back in before the end of the year?
It's very unlikely to almost not at all going to happen that we'll send troops back to Afghanistan by the end of the year or any time in the future. I spoke to Marine Corps General Kevin McKenzie, the head of U.S. Central Command, about this, and I asked him, do you see any way that U.S. troops would be going back to Afghanistan? And he said no. Now, one possibility is that CIA is in there. You remember that in 2001, when the Green Berets and Rangers went into Afghanistan, that there were CIA officers involved with that too. It's maybe even possible that at some point U.S. Tier 1 Special Operations Forces are so-called sheep-dipped into Title 50 and operate under the CIA rubric, but it's very, very unlikely we're going to see any U.S. troops on the ground in Afghanistan. I talked to McKenzie about the continuing training mission. He said that'll likely happen in another country, that they'll help the Afghan Air Force remotely, as well as take aircraft and pilots out for training to another country. But the likelihood of U.S. troops being on the ground in Afghanistan after September 11th is very, very unlikely.
Yeah, but Howard, that issue of the remote action, or this over-the-horizon force to be able to combat terrorism and insurgents, that's a real concern. That's a real worry of especially conservative lawmakers who have said this is the recipe for another Iraq, another situation where U.S. troops are going to have to go back in later on. So what do we make of that, and how confident is the DoD that they can really attack these insurgent groups and support the Afghan government forces from afar if they're not on the ground there?
I mean, it is obviously a big concern. As you see right now in Afghanistan, there are a number of districts that are falling to the Taliban. There was a Taliban fighter that took a selfie in Mazar-e-Sharif, which was one of the first cities in Afghanistan to fall in 2001, and they haven't been back there in 20 years. It's a big issue, a big concern. I talked to McKenzie about this. He said that the only way that U.S. forces would have any kind of kinetic action in Afghanistan is if U.S. national security interests are threatened and Afghan forces cannot do anything about it. And that's where the limitations are on any U.S. involvement on the ground or in the air in Afghanistan.
So Megan, what's the feeling in the Pentagon? I mean, is this forever war really over?
I mean, it's a lot like, what Howard was saying with General McKenzie, that at this point, everyone's really ready to get out of Afghanistan and sort of see what happens. For this year, at least, that's the plan. Like Howard said, there's a possibility that, we could have some special operations forces there in a more clandestine counter-terror capacity. But as far as the train, advise, assist of the Afghan National Army and the National Police, it's, we're gonna continue to pay for those things. So it's not really over, but as far as our troops on the ground there, that is over for the foreseeable future.
Well, another big change that we're going to see in the next few months is the issue of sexual assault in the military. In June, Secretary Lloyd Austin said that he would support taking those crimes, taking those prosecutions out of the hands of the chain of command, put them into independent prosecutors. Really a momentous change, one that the department has resisted for a long time. Some members of Congress want to go even further now, though. Look, take the prosecution of serious crimes, felonies, out of the chain of command completely, beyond just sexual assault crimes. So Megan, where do you see this? How do you see this playing out over the next few months?
It's going to be really interesting because now that the Defense Department has gotten on board with this idea of taking sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, and some other related crimes out of the chain of command's prosecution authority, now Congress is kind of at odds with them a little bit, because Congress says, oh, actually, we would like to take all felonies, murders, assaults, all of those things out of the chain of command. The Defense Department's not on board with that. But even beyond that, there are some sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence charges that are misdemeanors. And where would those end up under Congress's plan? So it's going to be interesting to see whether Congress gets on board with what the Pentagon is now proposing, knowing that the Pentagon is going to need some of Congress's authority to do what they want to do, or if Congress is going to sweep through, those lawmakers are going to sweep through and say, no, we're doing all felonies, and we'll figure something else out for the misdemeanors.
Howard, this would be a pretty significant shift and a real decision point for a lot of lawmakers here.
Well, it would be a huge shift, and as Megan mentioned, the Pentagon, and specifically Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, has come out and said he does not support taking anything besides sexual misconduct and those related crimes out of the chain of command. So that would be really up to what Congress does. And Leo, speaking of Congress, when do you think we'll see a defense budget?
Yeah, that's a great question, Howard. We're looking at a defense budget cycle that is usually most of the way through when we hit this part of the summer. But the budget didn't get introduced until May. It was 3 months late. We're seeing fights over the top lines. This is looking like we're going to go pretty deep into the next fiscal year, which starts October 1st, before we see anything. So annual defense authorization bill, which I know a lot of our viewers pay attention to, that helps set the pay raise each year. That's probably not going to be settled until close to Christmas. Same with the defense budget. We could be going into yet another year where the defense budget just gets drug on into the new year. So 4 months, 5 months, 6 months into the fiscal year, that means new programs don't get started. That means some new bonuses don't start. It becomes a real headache and a real mess down the road. So Megan, is the Pentagon getting stressed out about this yet? This is pretty late in the budget cycle for where we're at.
But there hasn't been the same maybe panic that you would describe it as in recent years, where generals and officials would go to think tanks and say, we need on-time, predictable funding. I think they're all sort of just holding their breath and and waiting it out. They've had to deal with this a lot. Getting an on-time budget has been a rarity more often these past few years. So I think they're just kind of digging in and waiting and seeing.
We're just a couple of weeks away from the start of college football season. So, only 5 months until the big Army-Navy game. Megan, what's your prediction for the contest this year?
I have a visual aid for this one.
Uh-oh. Oh, very nice.
Sorry,
Very
guys.
nice. Howard, what's your take on the Army? It's December 11th. It's right around the corner. You got to start making your picks, Howard. What do you got?
Absolutely. Well, my dad was in the Army, so I'm going to go Army 24-17.
Oh, see, all right, perfect. So we got one of each, and we'll make fun of the other one of you, and that way I don't have to make any predictions. I can just sit here and say, why were you predicting college football 5 months early? That's crazy. So listen, thank you both for coming on. Thanks to our viewers for tuning in this week. You can follow all of our coverage for the next 5 months, for the next few years at militarytimes.com. We'll see you next time.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.